Hello and welcome to Eden Live, where I am reading all of Eden by FREI live on Facebook and on YouTube with the recorder clips then finding their way onto Instagram, IGTV. And welcome to Volume 10. We are in a brand new section of the Eden Miniatures series, which is the published version of Eden by FREI, published as in paperback and ebook published. It was originally published in blog format and is still available in blog format online at edenbyfrei.net, which is spelled like this. If you can see this, I don't know. And we are in a completely different register. The previous volume, Volume 9, was called Encounters because it was all about real life, actual real life experience, lived encounters. And this one here now takes us back into the realm of fiction. This is called the Bournemouth Boscombe Trilogy because it's a trilogy, it's 3 short stories, three very short narratives that belong together, and they are set in Bournemouth and Boscombe. I always want to say Boscombe and Bournemouth, but I think that's incorrect. And so I've called this book the Bournemouth and Boscombe Trilogy, hoping that this is the right way of putting it, certainly in terms of hierarchy, in terms of seniority of the 2 towns. And why not just get into it? Because rather than me trying to explain what this is about, why don't I just read it? It comes as a trilogy, so there are 3 parts to it. And within each part, there aren't any real sub-chapters, but there are, of course, sections. And so we're just going to keep these webcasts short and these clips on IGTV reasonably short. I'm going to not read the whole of part 1 now in one go. I'm going to treat these sections as if there were chapters. And so this is the beginning of part 1 of the Bournemouth and Boscombe trilogy. And the first one, part 1, is called Pyromania. It was a particularly pointless but spectacular crime that shook the town, the nation, the world. It could not be explained, even though the earnest psychologist tried on TV to find reason for it, or if not reason, then at least rhyme. It could not be put to use, even though the angry prophet admonished the people for failing to see its hidden purpose. And it could not, so it seemed, oh, could it ever be forgiven? The sacred sage counselled thus, but the offence was so severe, the laceration so visceral, and the shock so unshakable that the hand of mercy may not extend for millennia. As for the messenger, the furious rabble killed her on the spot. George had recently moved to the area, and he was in no way unusual other than in the ways that everyone is a bit, especially when puberty all of a sudden gives way to sullen teenage anguish. George's anguish was no different to most, so most would have said, but he alone had to bear it, and he knew that nobody knew what it was. Nor did he care. Nor did he think about it or dwell on its nature. He felt an ache of malcontent with the world that was heavy and sad, and he didn't have words to talk about it, nor did he have friends who would have responded in terms of pure friendship if he had ever articulated it. The earnest psychologist, in retrospect, tried to reason that the breakup of his parents 2 years prior would have been an incision of trauma and separation in his life. The angry prophet berated the people, your passive aggression, your smug disengagement, your unbearable peace. Someone needed to come and infuriate you, shake you. His pain is now yours. Own his pain and turn it on the system that pains you. The sacred sage knew not of pain or system, but he knew of love. Love this boy, he is your son, he said, and they shouted him down. The world you are a part of, that you are a creation and at the same time creators of, is the world that has all of you in it and all that you hold dear, and it has also him in it and all that you despise. If you despise him, you despise part of you. The hatred that pains you is the hatred for the part of you that you don't want to know. Love him like your son, more than your son. Love him and forgive him. Extend the hand of friendship to him and say these words: you are forgiven. But George was not forgiven. They cried, he has not atoned, he has not shown remorse, he has not begged for our forgiveness on his knees as he must, since the horrendousness of his deed has no bounds. The sacred sage sighed. George had been wandering along the beach that he had recently moved to with his father, a spruce man called Mark. Mark was a good dad to George, and he loved his son in an uncomplicated way that, as far as he knew and was able to tell, made sense and sufficed. It was not an ungenerous love, it was genuine, real. George had no reason to doubt that his dad loved him, and his dad was far from his mind. On his mind was nothing specific as he ambled listlessly on the promenade from his new flat. He did not think of it yet as his home. Events he himself was about to unleash were to make sure that he never would. By Boscombe Pier towards Bournemouth town. He wasn't thinking of his friends, he had one or two, or his classmates. He was mostly indifferent to them. Nor was he thinking of any girl. Sometimes he thought of a girl. There was one in his class who was undeniably pretty and sassy too, and whose lips curled up by the edge of her mouth when she smiled, which he thought was attractive. And her name was Sarah, which reminded him of his aunt, who was also called Sarah, but he was not thinking of his aunt either that evening, making his way slowly towards Bournemouth. He wasn't thinking of homework, nor of any sports team he may or may not have had a passing interest in, and he wasn't thinking of a nondescript future, nor was he thinking there was no future or that the future would be nondescript. As it turned out, the future for George would be highly specific. He was moving at the languid pace of a lanky youth westwards, and he was going to meet up with some mates. This thought, such as it was, neither uneased nor excited him. It was one of those things that you did. So George's head was not filled with anything in particular at this time. He was neither angry, nor sad, nor lonely, nor elated. He hadn't had anything to drink at this point, and he hadn't taken any drugs either. The earnest psychologist found this hardest to deal with in retrospect. There was no trigger, no immediate cause, not now, and not in the hours and days that followed. The angry prophet disagreed. The cause was all around. The cause was there right in front of everyone. Just look and you see it. Open your eyes. The sacred sage knew not of any cause or what causes might be good or sufficient or real. He spake unto them, have done with fear and loathing and hatred and cause. Love him as if he had given or needed no cause. They yelled at him trance of shame and abuse. What caught George's eye and his attention and filled his head with a left field thought, one that seemed to come out of nowhere and should have fleeted through his mind without trace, but didn't. It lodged itself there and nested and laid its eggs and sat on them, warm and soft and heavy, till these thought eggs hatched. And they were not quiet or timid, but loud and vigorous and demanding to be fed with action. What ignited the spark of mischievous unrest that would have to, there already was no escape, yield unto abject disaster, but also glorious ecstasy, if but for one moment. What was on his mind were the beach huts. And that is the first section in the first part of the Bournemouth and Boscombe Trilogy. The first part of the Bournemouth and Boscombe Trilogy being called Pyromania. And if you'd like to know how the story continues, well, then you will just have to join me again next time, which in real time is on Wednesday, today being a Monday, and in your own time, if you find this at any time in the future, then it will simply be the next episode. And so until then, take good care, love and love, and see you very soon. Bye-bye.